Hello and welcome to Kickback Garage. Today we're going to talk about the Lambretta 5-speed gearbox. Mostly the Cyclone 5 and the MB5. Come back after the intro.
Messing around with these cameras, batteries going flat.
Alle sprang I lag og ville komme under tak. Ingen av oss merket at du hadde falt ifra. Hvorfor valgte du å dra? Hvem I faen kunne se den komme? Da høsten tok over sa vi hadde brattet av sommer.
Ever since the 70s, it's been a boy racer's dream to have a 5-speed gearbox. There were people that made them in the early 70s. I'm not sure who it was. Was it Roy Speed? Don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. But when Rimini Lambretta announced that they were making a 5-speed gearbox called the Cyclone 5, that's when the scooter world really lit up. Now, the Cyclone 5 gearbox has been made in 9 batches, for those that can't count. And the first 4 batches, I believe, they were made by Italian maker DRT. Now, when DRT Rimini Lambretta came out with the first batch of Cyclone 5 gearboxes, then I was in two minds whether to buy the first batch or be really clever and wait until it's been out on the market for a while. So I did the latter. So what I ended up doing was buying the second batch, and that was in the TS1 240, which it was dyno to about 23 horsepower, something in the region of that. So I had that gearbox for about 3 years and it was absolutely fine. So DRT, they made the first 4 batches. On the internet, there was very vague descriptions of gearboxes breaking on the first batch. There was enough information on the internet for me to want to at least try the gearbox batch number 2. And through the years, the Cyclone 5 gearbox has been manufactured by 3 manufacturers. Apparently, the DRT Cyclone 5 gearbox, batch number 1 and 2 was fine, although the internet would tell you otherwise. Batch number 3 was recalled because of manufacturing errors, heat treatment problems, stuff like that, they said. And batch 4 was supposedly okay. Then they had a little redesign, and they had 10 gearboxes made up by Crimaz, also in Italy. And they also made 50 more. Rimini Lambretta Centre, they weren't really happy with the quality of those gearboxes, and they cancelled the order. Consequently, Crimaz sells those as their own. According to Rimini Lambretta, they say they want people to keep away from the Crimaz gearbox. The thing with the Crimaz gearbox, there isn't a lot of people that talk about that. You don't know what sort of quality you're going to get, if it's really as bad as Rimini Lambretta say, if that's a conflict of interest or whatever it is, but we never know. I believe that batch number 5 to 9 is made by some unknown manufacturer in Italy that we don't know at least, but they give them the initials PZ. So last winter, Rimini Lambretta announced that they made an all singing and dancing gearbox that was going to be able to withstand at least 60 horsepower, if not more, to be built in their pre-built engines, the SSR 265, and these things were reportedly had 50 to 60 horsepower, and the gearbox should have taken that no problem. So what I did, I sold my gearbox from DRT number 2, I sold that to a friend, that is still going strong. And then I bought the new PZ produced Cyclone 5 Pro. Now that gearbox I did 2,500 kilometers on. Unfortunately, this batch 8 Cyclone 5 Pro gearbox, all singing and dancing, 60 plus horsepower, no problem. I'll show you. Have a look at these pictures.
Alle sammen ventet på et tegn. Skyene skygget over og markerte det med regn. Alle sprang i lag og ville komme under tak. Ingen av oss merket at du hadde falt ifra. Hvorfor valgte du å dra? Hvem i faen kunne se den komme? Da høsten tok over, sa vi hadde bratt la.
I'm not sure what happened there, apart from the fact that I lost a tooth off the loose gear first gear and the cluster first gear too. And the problem is I was so sure that I'd seized the engine. I pulled in the clutch, but nothing happened. I was still screeching along, and I was really wanging it in first gear when that happened. So it sent me off the road and onto a curb, and I bent my forks, which was a real bummer. And under further investigation, that's what I found out that it was the gearbox. Anyway, I contacted the Rimini Lambretta Centre, and they were really quick. I was going to the National Rally. I think this was like a Monday. I was going to the National Rally on Friday, and they didn't have anything in stock. When they said they've done a slight redesign on it. Now, to me, if you're gonna redesign the gearbox, they've had problems with them. But they said we've never had problems with them, and they've found out a new way to make the gearbox, and it's going to be super strong and everything's, and this is brilliant. It's been tested loads, and they had one on the way. And I phoned them up the next day, and they still hadn't received it. So what they did is they took the Cyclone 5 Pro batch 9 gearbox that they was building in an engine at the shop at the time. They took that out and they sent it to me express. I get it on the Thursday, and I consequently rode 620 kilometers to the National Rally the day after with no problems whatsoever. Now, the difference between all the first 8 batches and this last batch that I got was, I'll show you here on so on a standard Lambretta gear cluster, you can see that there's a gap in between the gears. But what they actually done, instead of keeping the gap, which they've done with the DRT and the Crimaz, I believe at least, the Crimaz gearbox, they've actually used that space to make the gears thicker. So now you get 5 gears in the same space, and the gears are pretty much the same thickness as the standard 4-speed gearbox. So that should prove to be pretty strong. So now I'm going to tell you about the MB 5-speed gearbox. I have both of these gearboxes so I can compare them. Now, Nova Racing, they make gearboxes for BSAs, BMW S1000RR, Ducati, Yamaha, and they make for MotoGP and like basically 200 horsepower machines. Now, when they came up with the design together with Mark Broders from MB Developments, they did the same as what I've seen on the last Cyclone 5 Pro gearbox. They have also used the space in between the gear cluster. They've put the gears closer together and been able to retain the original thickness. The guys at Nova Racing say that the thickness of the gears that they've achieved are basically the same thickness as the gears that they use in the most powerful machines they make gearboxes for. So really, in theory, this should be pretty indestructible basically. Now, I've done some research on the MB5 gearbox as well, and what I found there is that on the changes that they made is that the first gearbox they came out with, they thought that the jump between 4th to 5th was a little bit too big. So at batch number 2, they've gone down on the jump between the gears, and I've also heard that they had a little mishap with the laser etching. So when you're fitting the gears, it shows you which direction you're supposed to put the gears in, and I think on a couple of the gears they've had the etching on the wrong side. But if you follow the instructions that they come with, then I mean, it's really difficult to get them in the wrong way around. So that just seems like a tiny issue. Otherwise, I haven't heard of any problems at all with that one. So yeah, it was seems to have been a very long learning curve for Rimini Lambretta and Novatec, who are very good, like I said, very good gearbox makers. They sort of nailed it on the first attempt, so that's good. But I do believe that both these gearboxes, because I have had 5,000 kilometers on the MB5, not me personally, my son, and I've had about 8,000 kilometers on the Cyclone 5 gearbox. So at this point in time, I think you're pretty safe with both of these. But there are some differences with them, and I'm going to explain that now. So how are these gearboxes like for fitting? Now, the first Cyclone 5 I had, there was a lot of faffing about, and I had to take off the lay shaft and put a shim behind it, and there was a shim underneath the gear cluster, and you have to tighten the hub up, and then you have to take it out again, and you have to reshim it, you have to put all your gears in, you have to measure. I used a long time. I think I had the gearbox out about 15 times before I managed to fit the first type, which is batch 2, Cyclone 5. Now, the latest batch that I got last year is slotted in exactly the same as a normal 4-speed gearbox, apart from the fact that you don't have the shim under the gear cluster. And I think I used something like a 2mm gear shim on that thing there, and everything was fine. When it came to fitting the MB5 gearbox, I've had good experience in fitting 5-speed gearboxes. The only problem I had with that was the lay shaft, and that was actually a Casa Lambretta octopus lay shaft that I decided to use so that I can have the same setup on both scooters, and I can change the wheels and hubs between the two. So my advice there is, if you're going to fit the Cyclone 5 gearbox, then go for one of the Casa Lambretta type lay shafts. And if you're going to fit the MB5 gearbox, then go for the MB lay shaft, because they're sort of designed to fit each other. What I ended up doing with the Casa Lambretta or Casa Performance Octopus lay shaft, I had to mill it down 0.2 mil, I think, or something like that, just so that the gears sat a little bit proud of the lay shaft so I could shim it up properly. But that's really my fault because of the oddball parts that I chose. Now, both these gearboxes are really smooth to use. In use, I think maybe the MB Development's gearbox is slightly smoother. In fact, so smooth that I managed to find false neutral the other day.
Oh, and you're off again!
Now, this might be due to the fact that it's muscle memory. I'm used to the Cyclone 5. I'm not sure, but it's slightly less notchy when you're changing the gears. When you change gears on the Cyclone 5 gearbox, it's sort of, you've got like the whirring noise like you hear on the Vespers, especially like the PX. The MB box is a lot more quieter, and we can't put that down to oil because I used exactly the same oil in both gearboxes. But I'm not sure that I buy the story about the fact that they haven't had any problems with none of the others. I mean, they do mention themselves that they had a recall on the DRT batch 3, and that they had some problems with the prototypes from Crymaz, but they don't say anything about the latest ones that have got the PZ markings on them, and you'll see those on my first gear here. Taking all these things into account, I have to conclude that I will definitely choose the MB5 if I was going to build a new engine now. So we've talked about the two most expensive Lambretta gearboxes on the market. What are really the advantages? There are two trains of thought of what you can do with a 5-speed gearbox, how you set them up. One train of thought is that you use the 5th gear as an overdrive, and you set the primary ratio taller than what you've got in at the moment. And the other train of thought is you use the same primary ratio and you end up with a gearbox that is a lot closer together between the gears. Now, I've tried both of these configurations, and what I found was when I went for the overdrive method, I ended up just riding in 4th anyway, Now this was a TS1 engine, and that was pretty peaky. So I found that 5th gear was only usable if I was on the flat, on the motorway, doing like 110 plus. So I ended up just using 4th gear. Now in the latest build, both my SS 240 and my BGM 230, I use the same ratio that the manufacturers recommend. And the thing about that is that you get a closer gearbox. When you change gear, especially on the peaky motor, when I change gear, I go straight into the power. And that just makes it a lot more rideable. I also think that the 5-speed gearbox will really benefit standard scooters. In fact, if you've got a standard TV 175 or something like that that's got a very big hop between gear number 3 and 4, you're going to get a lot more out of that scooter, even with a standard barrel. But that's the nature of the game. If you're spending lots of money on your super tuned engine, then obviously you think about the 5-speed gearbox, whereas the guys who've got standard engines, they don't think about the upgrades quite as much, but I really believe that they'll benefit from it just as much as the tune guy. So that is a bit of food for thought for you. If you found this video interesting, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, comments, write them down at the bottom here. And during the winter I'm going to build engines, and I'm also going to build my BSA B33 if you're interested in that sort of stuff, and I'm going to document it this year. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. This is coffee, by the way. Actually it's empty, but yeah, you know. So that's a bit of food for thought. Food for thought.